Good afternoon, Evely, and I will tell you one story of a good viewing. The nightmare began on an otherwise unremarkable autumn evening. As the twilight deepened, Dorian awoke from restless dreams with a sinking dread that filled his very soul. A dread that had no rational source yet hinted at a fate far more sinister than mere exhaustion. He rose from his narrow cot in a dilapidated room reeking of mildew and lost hope, and as he staggered toward the cracked mirror, he beheld a face that was no longer his own. Fine lines and deep crevices had etched themselves into his skin overnight, his eyes reflecting a sorrow and terror that words could not capture. In that moment, his reflection revealed a man far older than his years, a prisoner to a relentless, unnatural force that stole his time. At first, Dorian had dismissed the unsettling signs as tricks of a fatigued mind. But as dawn broke, the evidence became impossible to ignore. His once supple skin turned brittle. The hands that had trembled with youthful nervousness now shook under the weight of an accelerated decay. Every tick of the unseen clock seemed to whisper a dreadful promise. His body was betraying him, aging at a pace that defied all reason, condemning him to an agonizing demise while the world outside remained oblivious. Isolation deepened his terror. He dwelled in a crumbling house on the outskirts of a forgotten town, a place where the wind seemed to carry the faint echoes of lost souls, and where the few townsfolk spoke in hushed tones of strange maladies and inexplicable misfortunes. As Dorian's transformation accelerated, whispered legends of a cursed lineage and forbidden rituals began to weave a horrifying tapestry. Neighbors averted their eyes in both pity and unspoken dread, as if fearing that his affliction might herald a doom that would eventually befall them all. Desperate for answers, Dorian scoured ancient texts and obscure tomes in the recesses of a decaying library. Yellowed manuscripts, brittle with age and scrawled in cryptic symbols, hinted at an ancestral curse, a forbidden pact forged in the shadows, binding his bloodline to a relentless force of decay. One faded passage described a ritual hidden deep within a forsaken forest, where nature itself had been twisted by malevolent energies. Though the promise of salvation beckoned, the cost was grim. The ritual demanded a journey into the heart of darkness, through a land haunted by unspeakable terrors and the restless dead. One moonless night, driven by despair and the fragile hope of redemption, Dorian ventured into the forest. The towering trees loomed like ancient, gnarled sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky as if trying to escape a fate too monstrous to name. The wind carried eerie murmurs, half-words that brushed against his mind with the chill of forewarning. With every snapping twig and rustling of dead leaves underfoot, his heart pounded with dread. The forest was alive with hidden terrors, and as he pressed deeper into its gloom, the boundary between nightmare and waking life began to blur. Amid the oppressive darkness, Dorian stumbled into a clearing where the air itself had grown unnaturally still. In the center stood a stone altar, its surface scarred with ancient symbols that pulsed faintly in the dim light. A cold sweat broke upon his brow as he drew near. The altar exuded an aura of malevolence, as if it were a gateway to realms of eternal suffering. There, at the heart of the clearing, a figure draped in tattered robes emerged from the shadows. Its face was hidden beneath a deep, dark hood, yet the presence it exuded was both commanding and horrifying. Without uttering a word, the figure extended a gnarled hand in invitation, a silent command that resonated with both promise and peril. In that harrowing moment, as Dorian stood before the ancient altar, the weight of his fate crashed upon him like a tidal wave. The figure's barely visible eyes burned with an otherworldly light as if they held centuries of sorrow and secrets. Dorian felt himself teetering on the brink of an abyss, surrounded by shadows twisting into grotesque shapes that defied the natural order. The ground trembled beneath him, and the very air vibrated with a sinister energy. A cacophony of whispers, neither entirely human nor wholly demonic, surged through his mind, a relentless chorus reminding him of the irreversible change that awaited if he dared to proceed. The forest groaned in a symphony of despair, heralding the beginning of an ordeal that would test every fiber of his being. Then, with a slow and deliberate motion, the hooded figure gestured toward a weathered, ancient book lying atop the altar. Its cover was adorned with symbols that writhed in the shifting light, each stroke imbued with a sinister vitality. As Dorian's trembling hand reached for the tome, a violent gust of wind tore through the clearing. The ground split open with a deafening roar, and the book's pages fluttered wildly, as if caught in a storm of their own making. From the fissure came a disembodied cry, a sound of pure anguish that echoed not only in the clearing but also deep within Dorian's soul. In the ensuing chaos, tendrils of darkness erupted from the gaping fissure, snaking across the clearing in a vortex of despair. The spectral wind howled like the anguished cries of the lost, and for a heartbeat, time itself seemed to dilate into an eternity of agony. The hooded figure's eyes gleamed with a grim finality as it turned, its gesture sealing a pact with forces beyond mortal reckoning. Dorian clutched the ancient book tightly, feeling its cursed energy seep into his very core. Every pulsation of the tome was a silent metronome marking the relentless countdown of his existence. Struggling against the invisible bonds of fate, Dorian felt as if he were being drawn into a nightmarish realm where the laws of nature had been rewritten. Faint, ghastly faces emerged from the darkness, their twisted features frozen in eternal torment, their eyes silently pleading for salvation. Their spectral forms danced around him like dying embers, each heartbeat amplifying their mournful chorus. It became horrifyingly clear that his accelerated decay was more than physical deterioration. It was a soul-shattering metamorphosis, a corruption that threatened to erase his very identity. Amidst the chaos, a single, piercing thought ignited within him, a desperate, almost futile desire to break free from this cycle of inevitable ruin. Yet every instinct screamed that escape was nothing more than a cruel illusion. As the ground convulsed beneath him and the spectral figure's sorrowful gaze locked onto his, Dorian realized with bone-deep terror that the ritual was not a path to salvation but the prelude to an irreversible transformation. In the swirling vortex of eldritch energies, the cursed book began to glow with a sickly light, its symbols pulsing in sync with a heartbeat that was not entirely his own. Visions of ancient rites and forgotten sacrifices flashed before his eyes, fragments of a history stained with blood and despair. The forest around him, once a silent witness to the passage of time, now roared with the fury of vengeful spirits. Every rustle of leaves and groan of the earth conspired to remind him that the curse was an unyielding force, one that would not relent until it had devoured his very essence. Even as the shadows deepened and the terror pressed in, Dorian found within himself a solitary spark of defiance. Clutching the accursed tome, he resolved, desperately and perhaps foolishly, to decipher its ancient inscriptions in hopes of uncovering a key to his salvation. But as his eyes traced the arcane symbols, the whispers of the forest grew louder, merging with the anguished cries of unseen entities. A profound dread settled into his bones, a dread not solely of his decaying flesh, but of the horrifying certainty that some fates are sealed by forces beyond mortal understanding. In that final, lingering breath of reality, the grotesque dance of decay and rebirth wove itself into the tapestry of Dorian's destiny. Every trembling sensation, every faltering beat of his failing heart, served as a brutal reminder that time, once a gentle river, had transformed into a raging torrent that spared none. The ancient woods, now a theater of despair and madness, echoed with the dirge of lost souls. As the spectral winds subsided into an eerie calm, Dorian stood on the threshold of a new, unspeakable chapter. A chapter where every step into the abyss threatened to shatter what remained of his humanity. And so, as the cursed clearing bore silent witness to his plight, Dorian took a tentative step forward. Behind him, the forest continued its mournful dirge, a ceaseless lament for those ensnared by the relentless march of decay. With the ancient tome clutched tightly in his grasp and the weight of 1,000 lost years pressing upon him, he stepped into the unknown, each moment a battle against the inevitable, each heartbeat a final defiance of the cursed time that had made his life a living nightmare. Dorian's descent into darkness deepened as he clutched the cursed tome, its unholy script burning into his eyes with every fevered glance. The once familiar world melted away into a phantasmagoria of twisted corridors and shadow-haunted vistas. In the gaping maw of the accursed forest, the boundaries between past and present, life and death, blurred into a nightmarish tapestry. Each step he took was accompanied by the echo of 1,000 tormented voices, their dissonant chorus urging him to surrender to the inevitable decay that gnawed relentlessly at his flesh and soul. The very ground beneath him pulsed with a malignant heartbeat, and spectral figures emerged from the mists like grotesque reflections of forgotten sins. Among them, Dorian recognized the gaunt visages of ancestors long lost, hollow-eyed specters whose silent accusations pierced him with despair. Their skeletal hands reached out as if to drag him into the void of oblivion, while their mournful wails became a dirge that resonated in the marrow of his bones. With every shuddering step, the relentless weight of time's cruel hand pressed down, accelerating the decay that transformed him into a living relic of a doomed lineage. Pressing onward, the forest reluctantly yielded to reveal an ancient, crumbling manor, its spires and ruined arches silhouetted against a blood-red sky. The manor loomed like a mausoleum of shattered dreams, its walls entwined with creeping ivy and scarred by unspeakable rituals. Terror seized Dorian's heart as he crossed its threshold, the stagnant air within heavy with the stench of rot and forbidden sorrow. In the vast, echoing halls, portraits of grim, spectral figures observed his intrusion with silent malice. Their painted eyes, disturbingly lifelike, followed his every movement and seemed to whisper of treachery, of an inescapable fate writ in blood and decay. Inside the labyrinthine corridors of the manor, time fractured into surreal moments. Dorian wandered through endless rooms where memories and nightmares collided in a macabre dance. In one chamber, a ghastly banquet of phantom guests feasted on remnants of life long extinguished. In another, the translucent silhouette of a woman in tattered lace reached out from behind a shattered mirror, her gaze a sorrowful warning. Every creaking floorboard and shifting shadow harbored the potential for unspeakable terror. The darkness itself appeared to writhe and contort, forming monstrous shapes that defied reason and logic, each a sinister omen of what was yet to come. Haunted by the accelerated decay of his own body and soul, Dorian's mind teetered on the brink of madness. His thoughts swirled in chaotic torment, a relentless tide of regret for a past now irretrievably lost, and despair at the future that promised only further ruin. The cursed manuscript's malignant influence seeped into every crevice of his being, urging him to surrender to the darkness as the sole refuge from his doomed existence. In a silent, dust-choked corridor, he encountered a spectral figure draped in despair, a wraith whose eyes smoldered with the agony of countless centuries. In a voice like distant thunder, the apparition recounted a tale of betrayal and sorrow, foretelling that the curse would not merely erode his flesh but would shatter the very essence of his identity. The manor itself seemed to breathe with sinister life. Its walls pulsed as though they possessed a heart, each throb a countdown to an unknown apocalypse. Flickering candlelight revealed fleeting murals of eldritch rituals and deformed deities, their expressions twisted in eternal torment. In a chamber strewn with the relics of a forgotten era, Dorian found a warped mirror. In its trembling reflection he saw not himself but a ghastly visage, a countenance ravaged by time and cursed decay, an image that foretold his inevitable demise. Desperation and defiance warred within him as he resolved, in that moment of unbearable terror, to unearth the secrets buried within the accursed manuscript, even as the manor's corridors stretched before him like the twisted arteries of a dying beast, promising further horrors with every step. And so, with trembling resolve and a soul heavy with despair, Dorian stepped deeper into the manor's embrace, each footfall echoing the final toll of a long-silenced bell, each breath a reluctant surrender to the inexorable march of decay. Thank you very much and see you all in the next video.